Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand of the company Horns of Odin. As always, before we jump into the show, I do have to plug our Patreon. Like I say, it's how we keep the podcast going. It's literally the lifeline. It makes us able to do what we do. It helps pay for everything behind the scenes. You get the bonus Q&A episode every week where we sit down with the guest after the main show, do a little bit extra. I say a little bit, sometimes they're the length of another podcast. Sometimes they're an hour long. So if you like an episode, you can have that bump a little bit where people ask them questions, but also sometimes it's just a chat and we expand on the main show. So they're always worth checking out. You're also going to get the smutty literature episodes that we're doing, which have been a lot of fun. Myself, Mags, and Claire are really, really enjoying recording those. And we're also discussing maybe keeping just 20 episodes, the latest 20 episodes live, and then putting the rest behind a paywall on Patreon. As much as we don't want to do it, we are kind of at a point where we need to try and find some extra revenue, I guess, for the podcast, and that's just very open and honest. You know, we have to, and we want to be able to keep the podcast going for as long as we can, and that's just something that we're looking at. So if you do want to check out the whole catalog, then that's going to be the place to go. It starts from £3 a month, less than a cup of coffee for me or Mags, and we greatly appreciate it. If you can, a 5-star rating, positive review wherever you get your podcast, and a like and subscribe and bell on YouTube. And I think that's it. So let's get into today's episode. This one's one we've been toying with for a little while now. So first, I will introduce my co-host and in-house archaeologist, Mags Pupiax. How's that?
I can't believe that stick.
Yep, it's sticking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to call out one of our listeners now. I love you all dearly, but sincerely and with love, fuck you, Phil. No, I'm sorry, I'm kidding. Like, you got Dick Biter Dance, but I feel like Poopyax is very PG-13. It's you know, it's fine. But at the same time, god damn.
If you don't know where that comes from, listen to a few episodes back and we discussed some Viking names for ourselves.
Wasn't it the burning questions with Dan and Mags?
I think it was the last time we did something like this.
Yeah.
Where we were just me and you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that rings a bell. It was. Okay, so we've touched on this a little while, probably for a few months. I've been like, we should talk about what is a god. That's a really cool idea. And then you were a little bit apprehensive.
Me apprehensive? Never.
Yeah, a little bit. But I wore you down.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. I'm struggling not to make a joke out of that, but yeah, you sure did.
Go on, you can make if you want.
No, it's gone now. Again,
Okay.
I'm all today, so you know.
Okay.
I either go for it or it doesn't happen.
All right. Okay. So yeah, this is, like I say, it's me and Mags. We're gonna discuss a concept, and I'd like if we did more of these, and I think we could probably, find some other stuff to do it around. So I've got a level of understanding from doing 270 episodes of the podcast. Mags obviously studying a PhD in and amongst like the Viking age, even though it's not Nordic, I guess the mythology side specific. But you're a Norwegian. You grew up with in and amongst this stuff, so you have an understanding as well. And
Yes.
and I think we both have our own personal backgrounds. I wouldn't say I was particularly spiritual or religious. You grew up in a very different situation. You grew up in a very religious background.
Yeah, but also I just want to do like a tiny little caveat on that end, because I've also partially grown up in the States, right? And like growing up very religious can mean different things in different places, right? Even also here in Norway. So I'd say that I grew up in a very religious household in the sense that both my parents are priests. My grandpa was a priest. My great grandpa was a priest, and a lot of my extended family also works in the church.
They were so like, wow, we've got another female priest here. We've got
No,
one.
my sister did just become a youth pastor, so
Oh, okay,
she took the baton. So I'm
okay.
very grateful for that. And there
She's
were no expectations, but that's exactly what this little caveat was for. Was that I would say that I would characterize my experience of growing up in what you could call quote unquote a very religious household quite differently than what kind of you might initially expect when hearing that phrase.
hmm
Like it was I feel like I'm excusing it, but I just want to be very clear that like there was no like sure I had maybe more intimate knowledge with like the Bible than my peers. I went to Sunday school, and I went to church every Sunday, and we said grace, and we talked about things, but there were never any questions that were off the table or taboo.
yeah, okay.
My dad read me Harry Potter growing up. I read Twilight. Like it wasn't an exclusionary religious upbringing, if you understand what I mean. Religion was just part of our lives, but it was never. Uh,
Is Twilight a sin?
but I remember being well. Here's the thing: not in my eyes, but I remember when Twilight came out in the movie theaters in like 2008. I was a Twilight like super fan at the time. I was 14. Don't judge me too hard.
It's all right.
Um, no, I'm not saying it to you. I'm saying it to our current and future listeners. Um, and my friend's mom was driving us, and she asked if I had my parents' permission because they were non-religious, and she was
Oh,
really scared that she was like helping me kind of do something
yeah.
that was very like not okay. And
Those
she's like, "But
sexy.
aren't like your parents priests?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "So are you sure you have their permission to go see Twilight?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "You sure
Mhm.
you're okay?" I'm like, "We're not skipping school, are we?" She was like, "No." And I'm like, "Then they'll be fine with it.
Yeah.
It's not a
Those,
problem."
those sexy, shiny vampires just leading you astray. Oh, well, yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, this is like I say, a bit of a concept episode, but I think there'll be a lot of worth to it. So, whilst neither of us, I would say, I don't know if there is an answer to this question actually. So, what is a god? Is what we're going to be looking at, and I don't think there is a. It's a very philosophical question, isn't it? I don't think there is a specific answer. It's different for different people in different cultures, different time periods. So I don't think even on an academic level there is a bang on answer, even when it comes to apply to a Nordic mythology aspect. So we're going to just look at this question, and we're going to look at what we think a god is, our opinions, maybe how we grew up thinking of a god, how we can then apply that
Yep.
to Nordic mythology, and what we think a god is in Nordic mythology, and kind of just go back and forth and see where we go with this. And
Yeah,
I'm looking
it's like
forward to it.
a conceptual conversation type episode, right? So we might like I assume that I at some point might even do like real time like research looking up stuff while we're talking
Is that
about
because we
this.
both forgot to research before?
Dan, don't call us out. But yes, we 100% absolutely did.
but
um
but I
but also being
also
like, oh, okay, what is actually the definition of a god? I could even try to get like my parents on the line, be like, hey, what would you define, like what defines a god? What would that,
Mhm,
what's that? And then we're
yeah.
gonna get like 45 minutes of them just talking about stuff. But
I think, but I think that's part of the fun with this. That even if we researched, what are we researching? We're researching somebody
you know,
else's idea of what a god is, because it is such a personal thought that all we would do was just read what somebody else
it's
thinks.
highly conceptual, and I also do think from my own research, having like my own work, professional work, having looked into stuff, um and the way that knowledge is produced, I do wouldn't surprise me if just the term god itself has the way that we currently use it become very much like a cover all umbrella term that we put a lot of entities into to make sense of them, but exactly what that meant for the people who worship them or worshiped them way back in the day, they might not have necessarily vibed with our definition of what a god is. Like, I don't know this at the current moment, but like it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case.
Yeah, I no, I agree. So let's get started rather than us just beating around the bush for as long as we can without having to get started.
But can we can just keep doing that, Dan? No, I'm kidding. Let's go. But honestly,
Yes.
why don't you get it going? Because I'm looking at a book in my bookshelf right now that I should very much have on hand for this episode.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go grab it.
Okay, you go grab that. And I will start. I don't know if Max can still hear me, so I might wait for it to get back. Um, hang on, someone. Uh, oh yeah, yeah, Jennifer. I agree. We'll get to that. I was going to read that out now, but I'll save it because I want to start with broadly outside of Nordic mythology and what we just off the bat, like without any research, what we would consider a god. I want to start there and then see if we can apply that into uh, paganism, I guess, and heathenism and Nordic mythology.
Okay,
You're back.
so as you know, the proud academic and bibliophile I am, I did say I was gonna grab one book, but I of course ended up grabbing three.
Okay.
So I don't know whether or not these will come in handy, but they might. So first of all, the one that I was thinking of, which I'm gonna have to do like real time translation of this, but it's Gro Steinsland's Norrøn religion, which is Gro Steinsland's Norse religion. And we've got Houston Smith's The World's Religions, and we got Caroline Larrington's The
Huh?
Norse Myths, a guide
Nice.
to the gods and heroes.
Hmm.
So,
Perfect.
here we have stuff that we might need.
Those books are not getting opened once.
Oh, I'm a prove you wrong right now.
All right. So yeah, I was saying what I want to do is I want to start with just off the top of our heads, without any research, what
God damn it.
we consider to be a god. Like what, just without any, outside of Norse mythology, just if you closed your eyes and thought of a god, what do you see?
Ooh, that's really interesting because um I'm having trouble, just the definition I'm thinking about, I'm having the trouble of like, okay, how do you then discern between like spirits and entities and like, yeah. Okay, well, do you want to go first, Dan, so I can have some time to think about it, please?
Well, I didn't want you to think about it too much, but I will go first.
Okay,
So
great.
I'm gonna again bear with us with this episode. A lot of this is going to be off the top of our heads. We're thinking about it in real time. We're kind of
Yep.
throwing things out there, and that's part of the fun and the vulnerability, I guess, of it. So for me, I would say a god is probably aligned more with the Christian idea, and that's probably not on purpose, but I think coming from England, which is mainly a Christian country, and being
Famously.
being raised by my grandma was very Christian, so did go to Sunday school as a youth. We had, even though I would say England isn't massively Christian anymore, and religion I don't think is a big part. I think it's still dotted in there into the school system, into literature. It just pops up. So I think that's kind of just bred in. So I would say that to me, a god would be like an omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent,
Omnipotent.
fig.
Yeah.
Yeah, like an omnipotent figure who is kind of all knowing, all knowledgeable, is everywhere. And I guess that could apply to more than one of those figures. It doesn't have to
Yep.
be just say a god, just one. In like the monotheistic idea of just one god, but it would be that kind of thing. So you would maybe put that to different figures, but they would be a type of almost supernatural being that is above
Well, that yeah, I think that I
humans,
mean the
I
way that we
guess.
use the term supernatural now is very different. Like if you look at like what the word is actually made up of, the word super and natural, it is something that is more than natural. So I mean, you could of course argue that a god is a natural thing, but it that type of a presence or a being, I don't know if you could categorize a god as a being, but then it is more than nature, right? By default.
Mhm.
So I absolutely think that. I mean, I jive with that.
Yeah, so that would
I think
be.
that's a really good definition, Dan. And you used two of the words that I was going to use. So, joke's on me for asking you to go first.
Sorry, we may have the exact same definition. I'm going to give the dictionary definition as well when we're done, and then we're going to
Okay.
apply this. So
What
what?
dictionary?
The
Merriam Webster?
Oxford, the
Ah,
Oxford,
Oxford.
the Oxford Language Dictionary.
Yeah. They usually
So
do
you
good work,
please,
don't they?
please go. Please, what? Just off the cuff, without too much thought. What do you see as a god?
I mean, I am also obviously quite influenced by growing up in, a Christian family and in a predominantly culturally Christian uh, place. I would say three places because I grew up in Norway and the States and Spain, which are all culturally Christian in very different and similar ways. Um, but I would think that I would define a god as um hang on, I'm because here's the thing. I've also had series of hyperfixations on both Greek mythology. Lol at me for not having hyperfixation on Norse mythology, but different types of mythologies in my teens too. So sure, I'm very much influenced by the Christian and culturally Christian areas and settings I grew up in, but I've also had a real fascination with different types of religions and mythologies. So I think my definition of a god is also somewhat influenced by that because I can't just think monotheistically, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
But to me, I guess I would define a god as some sort of um, vague entity, vague or specific entity that is, just like you said, Dan, omnipotent, omnipresent, and has some sort of ability to directly influence the world, whether or not they choose to do so.
Hmm. Okay. All
Yeah,
right. So the I guess the Oxford Dictionary um, definition. Oh well, the when you Google it, this is the one that comes up. But I believe they pull from the Oxford Dictionary. It says that in Christianity or other monotheistic religions, the creator or a creator and ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. Or number two, in certain other religions, a superhuman being or spirit worshipped as having power over nature or human fortunes, a deity. So I'm guessing that kind of fits more to what we're going to be discussing in terms of Nordic mythology.
yeah. Because could you repeat the first one?
Yeah. So in Christianity and other monotheistic religions, that's in
Sure.
brackets to start with, it's the creator and ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. So
Mm.
for them, it just means the person who
Yep.
created the world. And then in certain other religions, guessing what they mean is more heathen or pagan religions, a superhuman being or spirit worshipped as having power over nature or human fortunes, a deity. So the first question I have when I read this, particularly the second one, and when I did a little bit of research earlier on what a god is, it tends to be somebody who has influence or something that has influence over humans. And then that made me think, can a human be a god? Can so somebody like Xerxes of fame of the Persian Empire, who, according to the movie 300, I don't know if this is a historically accurate claim, claimed himself to be a god king. Now, knowing
Well,
the
you
little
got
that I,
Louis the 14th too.
yeah, so you have these uber powerful kings or leaders of an empire who certainly have power and influence over huge regions of people. So, do you think, the first question, do you think a human can ever evolve to god, to being a god, and
Okay,
certainly
so
whilst
so I'm gonna
alive?
I'm gonna immediately flip this, Dan, because there
Okay.
is a difference between what I believe and what I believe people have believed or
Oh,
still
okay.
believe. See,
Mm-hmm.
I am very uh, boring, somewhat enlightened, as one of my dearest friends calls me, annoyingly woke person in many respects. So, personally, that's not something that, is in my purview, but I absolutely 100% believe that it is a part of religious practices the world over and has absolutely been a part of belief systems in the past as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, you don't have to go further than Greek mythology to look at that and all the different demigods and Hercules and everything. Hercules at some point becomes a god. He attains godhood. So one thing is what the myths say. Another thing is what people, such as Xerxes and Louis XIV, um, claim to give themselves, like to legitimize their own power. Those are also two different things.
But
Because, you know, and like Lee in the chat also points out, Egyptian kings. I don't have, enough intro. I don't have enough info to kind of go into a tangent on that. But absolutely, there are so many instances of godhood being an attainable thing to some extent. But it also seems to have been
Mhm.
at quite a privileged position, whether or not we're talking about different mythologies or practices, that it seems to be something that a select few could attain or believe to attain.
Mhm. Do, don't you think it's interesting? uh, And again, this is something I was thinking about today. That I'm trying to think of any other than some specific gods within religions, and some in Egyptian off the top of my head, and is it Buddhism maybe, that have non-humanoid. So Hinduism, I think, has some there of non-human like gods. For the most part, most gods, but the religions, whether it's even, I would say, the three main Abrahamic ones, I would say, I would say most people would consider them to look like a human.
Yeah.
And when it comes to
Well, except
Nordic
well,
mythology,
not
you would.
well, no, well, no. I'm going to stop you there. When it comes to the three Abrahamic ones, they are quite different. I would say in the sense that God is never pictured as a being. That is the whole point. Whether or not we're talking about Islam or Judaism or Christianity, you cannot actually, first of all, in some of them, you can't even say the word
It's one of
God.
those I'm not going to comment on. So,
Yeah, no, but that's something I can say from my own personal experience.
mm,
The whole point is that God is too great to illustrate. You cannot actually depict a being such as God because they are too great for our understanding. So you cannot like depict them as a person because that
Yeah.
would then, subtract them down to a being like a person, and they are so much more than that. There are limited understanding could never even comprehend what they might look like if
Hmm.
they even look like anything.
But okay, but their children,
But
their children are
sure,
very
but they again
human.
are not gods.
No, well,
Not well.
again, it depends. It would depend on the
Mm,
different flavor of
mm, mm-hmm.
Christianity as to whether Jesus is God or not. Because in some he's just the son, and some he is just a literal representation of God, right?
Well, no. Here's the thing. Oh, depend. Oh, I really want to get my dad on the phone for this. I've talked this with about this with him so many times. Like Jesus is basically, if you like distill God into a person, that is what God would be. But Jesus is also a person with flaws. That is, you know, keep saying this, but that's from my understanding. Again, I am not a theologian, but the point is that God took like parts of himself, tried to make them into something that could fit into a human,
Hmm.
had a child, and that is Jesus. But Jesus is
Hmm.
also flawed, just like any other person. But at the same time, it's a complete paradox,
Yeah.
which is the
Well,
theology.
some could say on purpose. So
Hmm.
Jennifer just said, put a great point, but the Bible says we were made in God's image. So,
Yeah, I know.
so there
And
we
I'm not
go.
trying to defend things
I
either. I'm
know.
just like, this is just fun because as we're talking about this, I'm just replaying 15,000
Hmm.
conversations I've had with my parents of me just like really trying to bust their balls about stuff like this that doesn't make sense, and they're just completely unfazed and be like, "Yeah, but faith is weird, honey. Things aren't supposed to make
Yeah.
sense. The world is weird, faith is weird, and if you don't jive with it, that's fine. But here's
Yeah,
our
yeah, yeah.
understanding of it, and let's see if you vibe with it or not."
Yeah, well, it's true. But well, I guess what I was saying was, for the most part, a lot are anthropomorphic. They're kind of
Sure.
humanoid figures, and I
Well,
wondered.
most of the ones that we know of. Eh?
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and I wonder whether there's something to that, because I think that you have figures. Let's put us. We have to put ourselves back. We're talking about the Vikings, so 1,000 years ago. Let's say you had a king, even let's say Charlemagne, like pre Viking Age. You had a
yeah,
king who was an emperor of a huge landmass, pretty much
sure,
untouchable to the everyday person. They will never see Charlemagne and the land that he owns and the wealth that he has. They just hear about it from a person who told a person who told a person, and they know
sure.
by the rules that are imposed of them, and they know that this figure that they're never going to see rules the land, and it would be quite easy for that to then be passed down as that. Oh, Charlemagne's a god. Like
Yeah,
he
well,
has this
again,
much power. He's a god like figure, and if he
yeah,
claimed that, you can see how quickly you could believe that. Or if you
yeah,
had
I'm
a warrior who was seemingly untouchable because they were so good in battle, you could see how maybe that could rise up through legend to where they
sure.
become like a god adjacent figure. I guess
Hmm.
the original question was that, do you think it's possible for a human, whilst alive, I would say, transcend into being a god? Is it possible for a living, breathing human? Because I think once you die, that becomes another thing. There are legends, there's obviously, like, we all know of martyrdom and
Hmm.
the legend that comes after people. But whilst alive, is it possible for somebody to be a god? Because
Yeah, but here's my thing though. Um, for those of you watching on YouTube, you're gonna have the joy of like just seeing my face do a bunch of different things during Dan's very eloquent, uh, you know, little
Well,
monologue there, which I'm like, I'm not really disputing what you're saying. Uh, I'm really not, but I just think that that part of the conversation of what makes a god very quickly becomes extremely reductive because it's if I'm just going to allow myself to be a bit of like an annoying, like stereotypical annoying feminist for a second, the whole like who gets to be a god in our current western understanding, also like historically, it's just like who's the guy with the biggest dick and the most power type of thing. And it's like used as this. I know that I'm also being extremely reductive in the way that I'm categorizing it now, so jokes on me. But it, like, yeah, sure, of course they could. Yeah, obviously, sure, if you have like if you're able to wield the power that you have on the people around you to a certain extent, of course you could mythologize yourself. 100%. But does that make you a god in your contemporaneous understanding of what a god is my question, and I don't have an answer to that. Maybe
well,
the answer is
that's the whole point,
yes.
is that we don't have an answer to any of this. But that's kind of the first part that, and I guess I'm sticking with that just because of the idea that by Snorri's standard, he said that the Aesir came from kind of the Asia region or Middle
But
East,
you
was it?
know what? Yeah,
And came
because
across. So they're humanized to
yes,
Snorri. He gives them a very much a linear human history.
but that then I think also it is a classic example of Snorri trying to make things make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And the thing that I think is intriguing in the way that many mythologies that are um, from what we today categorize as the Western part of the world are often humanoid, which I think, I don't know. Here is where I need to do research, and people might absolutely call me out on this, but I have a suspicion that the reason for that is because of we are imagining something greater than ourselves that has power over us, and we view our I'm talking about like western people here, and we view ourselves as the center of the universe, so therefore the creatures or the beings that wield power over us, it would make sense if they also look like the better versions of us in a certain way, or not
Mm-hmm.
even, they don't even have to be better. Look at Hephaestus in Greek mythology. That is an awful case of, of honestly vilifying disabled people. Hephaestus was thrown from Mount Olympus by his mother Hera because he was ugly. So he always has to walk with a cane. But he's the god of fire and like not forgery as in like forging bonds, but like the forge and making metal. Hephaestus is a fucking badass, but he looks like crap, according to mythology.
Oh, poor
But then
Festus.
again, yeah, but then you have so many other global mythologies where if there even are conceptualized deities or gods, if you will, they are not necessarily anthropomorphic at all. So I think this like presupposition that we have that anthropomorphic gods are like the standard go-to of all kind of past religions is also a Western prejudice that we have, because that
Maybe. I
those
th-
are the ones that we are most intimately familiar with.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Maybe I don't know. I guess the one that stands out to me would be Buddha, who's a big one. Because,
Sure.
and again, I think it would be interesting because he's, I don't know how much this, I don't know enough to know if the story has any real historical basis if it's based on a real person. But the idea is that it's a, a son who comes from a wealthy background and he's kept behind the walls and he escapes and sees the real poverty in the world because he's been showered with lavish because his father wouldn't let him see any evils or bad in the world. He goes out, sees it, sees the real world, and then spends his life giving and looking after people. So that's another idea, one that comes to mind of it's not about who's got the biggest swinging dick. It's kind of the opposite to that. It's a figure who comes from a human background, from maybe a family who has the biggest swinging dick, but then
Yeah, yeah,
decides
sure.
the opposite to then give back and try and heal and help and
I hear you trying to catch me out, Dan, and I respect it. I respect it a lot. That being said, I will say that you are completely right. My whole little tirade there was not a catch all, but I do think that it still stands because it is being used that way a lot. But then you have exceptions to the rule, like for example, Buddha.
Mhm.
Um,
I it wasn't.
but
I
there are
actually
also
wasn't trying to
different.
catch you out. I was just meaning that
Oh, sure you
that.
weren't. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean that's the one that comes to mind where it for me, that the one that I know of that's different, that is a figure that comes from, seemingly comes from being a human, a regular human, to a god in the journey of the life,
Yep.
rather than being born a god.
But that's exactly what makes this discussion so freaking frustrating and interesting, isn't
Impossible.
it? Because it's almost fucking impossible to narrow down exactly what a god is because it entirely depends on the entities we're talking about, the contemporaneous historical period we're talking about, and the ideas that I'm and I think even just the notion I think the notion of faith and godhood also is so philosophically
Hmm.
intriguing because I think it is very I think it is very n- coming from a religious family in what's become predominantly a very secular culture. It's really interesting that I have met so many people uh, who now almost look at people who are practicing any type of religion as being less intelligent.
Hmm.
And I think that that is a fascinating standpoint because I think that believing in something greater than yourself, whether or not it is a fleshed out thought or whether it's just like a feeling that you have, is a really I hesitate from saying natural, but I can't think of like a better way to put it. But I think it is a very natural phenomenon. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we have so many religions and mythologies because the world doesn't make sense. So it is I think it is a very human thing
Hmm. It's
to
very.
believe that something is out there, whether or not they're out to get you or out to help you. But surely something must be behind all of this craziness and weirdness around us, right?
And it's a very personal thing, and this discussion is a very personal thing. But you said it before, even with your parents when you were younger, you used to try and trip them up and point out the
Mm.
inaccuracies,
I was a shit ass teenager. I
and
didn't really
there,
go out much, but like I would ask them hard hitting questions.
but there's always an answer to it. There's always a, not an excuse, but there's always a reason for this and that.
Or there isn't,
And well,
actually.
there's always the catch-all of that God moves in mysterious ways, and
Yeah, but
those
not
kind of
really.
those kind of catch-all things that allow people to fit it into their life, and not wrong. I don't think
No, no,
wrong.
no. But I just wanted to clarify also that I think that's something that I miss from being a person of faith. I'm not anymore.
Hmm.
Not because of like a personal decision I made. I don't know if you could compare it to like losing your keys or something. I lost it along the way, and unfortunately, it doesn't. I can't find it again.
Yeah.
And I have had many long conversations about, particularly my dad, about this, which has been extremely rewarding. Uh, because he's just been curious about why that's happened, and I've been curious about why it doesn't make sense to me anymore.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's been extremely interesting. Um, but I think that that's the thing that I miss most about being a person of faith is the way that I was taught how faith works anyway, and I know this is a very different experience for many people. Is that just to your point of there being catch-all answers? That is not the type of faith that I come from. In the sense that I've been taught that, you know what, sometimes things doesn't make sense. And sometimes shitty ass things happened and it's no one's fault and it sucks. And we can't really, and maybe it's like, yeah, God works in mysterious ways, but at the same time, yeah, no, you know what, actually, fuck that.
Mm,
I remember mom said to me at one point, like, I have had many conversations, like, this might sound strange, but like in her way of practicing faith, it's like I've had so many conversations with God where I've been extremely angry with them.
mhm.
I've been so angry and things don't make sense to me and this is so unfair. And I don't have the answers I need and I still believe and I still have faith. And I'm like, how do you do that?
It's it is a thing. Like I've like I
I
said,
love it. It's so interesting.
there's a beauty to
It's so
faith, and I
beautiful.
think it's sad that the religion has such a bad I guess name or time in the modern era, because I think, like you say, most people would consider, or some people would consider them to be less intelligent or just silly, and just kind of dismiss it. But I think there's such a beauty in it that I would love to understand and have that kind of idea of just not always blind faith, because I think blind faith
Oh, that's different.
can go in a negative way, but a
Oh,
faith
sure.
in something and a belief in something that must the weight must be different. I don't know. I can't speak because
Mhm.
I've never had it. I guess you have.
It
Um,
does. I do
that
feel
feeling of that, you know, that there is something kind of watching over you, maybe, or there is a, even if it's not always consciously thinking, that there is a reason for every little thing that happens. That kind of overarching thing that's there, that you have this
there's
comfort that
almost,
everything's going to
yeah,
kind of be okay, because
yeah.
there's this thing there, and that must
Or
be
like,
really lovely.
ev- yeah, or even if everything isn't going to be okay, at least you won't be alone,
Mm.
right? Like you are all like in the best way possible, not in like when you're masturbating and do want to be alone, but like when you really
I've
need
always wondered that,
someone.
because God's seen me in some in some
You know what,
positions.
genuinely? Oh my god, I hope mom and dad don't listen to this episode, but you've been warned, mom and dad. I'm going to say something that you might not be super comfortable hearing. Um when I was a teenager and I did start to masturbate, that did trip me up a little bit.
Hmm.
And then I realized God's probably seen. Like, if God is like an entity that is everywhere all the time, watches everything, this can't possibly be the worst or weirdest thing they've witnessed. Like, this has got to be fine.
Imagine if all the gods were playing top trumps, and
Oh my god.
you masturbating was the top. They were like, "Fucking check this out. What is this?
Oh my god, that would have been sad for them.
What what's she doing with that?"
Ah.
but
But like I will, to your point, Dan. Yeah. Exactly. That is like that comfort that you're talking about. I
Mhm.
do I wouldn't say that I very rarely feel lonely, but I do feel more lonely now than I
Yeah.
did when I was a person of faith. There's almost like I've always had, it's almost like a conceptual pillow that I've always had, that I've always not necessarily carried around, but that's just always been there. And when
Mhm.
I need it, I can just kind of lay my head on it a little bit if I need to.
Yeah.
But now that pillow isn't there anymore. And I've got
Yeah.
to admit, like, that's, I miss it. I miss it a
Yeah.
lot. But
I
that
get
doesn't
that.
mean that religion's going to start making sense to me again just because I miss that pillow. But I can
No.
recognize the beauty in it, while at the same time also recognize that there is a reason why a lot of religions have such a bad rep.
Mhm.
But then there's
Well,
also like the catch-all within and without religions, right? There's the catch-all of all religions are this, and the catch-all of all religious people are this.
mhm.
Those are also two very different things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, before we go too far off topic and just talk about religion in in general,
Us off
um,
topic? Never.
well, yeah, I just want to piggyback on the back of that last thing that I think that it's okay if your thought on religion and spirituality change and is fluid throughout your life. I think a lot of people probably find
Hard yes.
religion and more spirituality as they get older, as they get closer to whatever comes after this kind of physical life that we have now. And as they lose people that they're close to, I think we probably look deeper than when we're young. When we're young, we think we're immortal. I was an arrogant little prick when I was young. I thought I knew everything about religion and religion was dumb, and that I knew everything, and that
Better?
it was
Yeah.
all just going to turn. It was all, we're all just going to kind of be worm food when we died. It all just turned off, and I knew the end, and that's what I thought because I just was a little idiot. And then you grow up, you like say you lose people, and then you start to think, well, actually, I had this idea that it all just goes black, but I really liked this person, and I don't wouldn't want them to just be gone and
Fade out into
it to be
nothingness.
nothing. So maybe actually I'm going to reevaluate my thoughts, and possibly there
Mhm.
is something after. And I think that starts to play into it and change people's opinions and maybe soften. And the beauty about this is that nobody really knows either. There is no answer because you
No.
can't go beyond and find out. And I like the idea that all the different gods and all the different religions are actually just like different halls in the afterlife. And everyone has their own little hall that they can go to and hang out in with their religion if they want. But they can nip over to the other ones and say hi and hang out. And they all have like a big party every so often and just hang out together, and they all exist. Because
Oh, I love
who
that.
says that can't be a real thing? Why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't they all just
Oh, I
hold
love
space
that.
in this kind of afterlife, whatever it is? We can have them all. Let's all have a little
I
place.
remember that makes me think that, oh, I love that so much, Dan. That makes me think of this show that was on Barnateva, like this children's show that went on like every night at 6 o'clock when I was little, called Husamedadadi, or The House with All the Weird Stuff in It is the literal
Okay.
translation of that title. Which was very 90s looking back. But it was this like old house with all these different rooms, and all these different rooms had like all these like all the different vibes and like all the different things. And that makes me think of that like maybe the
Yeah.
afterlife is like this house where all the different like faiths or religions or mythologies have like their own rooms, and then they can all gather in like communal areas and have fun and have
Yeah.
a
Why
party.
not? Why not?
Yeah.
We all have our little areas on Earth. Why not after?
Mhm.
But in specifically a god figure. Let's try and apply it to Nordic mythology because
Okay, time to crack the book open.
yeah, what started this idea? I think was the idea of Loki. I think.
Dude, you're gonna have to trail your way back to it, because I just remember you suddenly like having a discussion, like
I
we were
can't
having a
remember the
discussion
episode now. It
about
was that long ago.
some of the gods, and then you just suddenly go, we should do an episode on that. And my initial reaction just being, no.
I no. I think it was the idea of Loki and Loki's children, and would they qualify as
Yes.
being gods? I think that was it. Um, I also another little idea that just came into my head while I was looking at this. Why do we have a word for god and goddess? If a god is just
Yeah,
uh,
honestly true. Why?
if a god is like a separate being that's not kind of like transcends the silliness of gender, why do we have like why one or the other? Why don't we just have
Do you
the
want me to
one?
be lame, but also like
Uh,
real? You know what I'm gonna say, right?
I know. Go on, say
Yeah,
it.
because you could use the word God regardless of gender, but then you do have the term goddess. And I have a sneaking suspicion that that is because of patriarchy,
Yeah, we.
that we need to specify when it has a vajayjay or not.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so. Just so you know that they're not quite
Or
as
it
good as
has
the
the
male ones.
possibility of a vajayjay.
That was a joke, by the way. I hope no one heard that.
I genuinely didn't actually.
I said just so we know they're not quite as good as the male ones.
Oh no, but like it.
That's
But in
probably was the
practice,
idea,
yeah.
yeah. Uh, but okay, so let's get into to Nordic mythology specifically. So I think for the
Hang
most
on,
part,
I'm looking through. I'm finding the page. Hang on,
yeah.
give me a second.
It's all right. So for the most part, I think everybody has an idea of there being two groups of gods. That's what I guess we're told from Snorri and the Edda. It is probably that you have the Asia or Asia and the Vanir, and
Good.
you have
Okay,
these.
because I was just looking at the Norwegian terms now, and I was like, "Fuck, what are the English ones again?"
So you have these two. You have these two groups of gods. I think that's where most people would go, and that you have, you know, your typical figures like Odin, Freya, Tyr, Loki. Everyone's going to say that Loki is a god. And then, well, Freya and Freya would be Vanya, right? Yeah, but
What?
Freya and Freya would be Vanya, wouldn't they? They classed as like
Yeah, aren't they?
yeah, but you have these.
But then again, does it matter?
And was it even a real thing, or did Snorri make it up? Who knows? Um, but in
Snorri.
most people's minds, you have these two groups of gods that are human esque. They tend to have somewhat superhuman abilities. They're certainly not omnipotent. Um, they're certainly not omnipresent. They're not anywhere near as powerful as say the Abrahamic god. They have their fallacies. They have their good
They
sides.
are like just kind of humans plus, in a
Yeah,
sense.
they're kind of like Marvel superheroes a little bit.
Yeah, but
They're
it's like, but an interesting thing about this. Sorry, I didn't let you finish. Go ahead.
no. Please go.
But like, while we're on the topic of the Aesir versus the Vanir, is that, please correct me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly. Also, because I'm like switching between Norwegian and English as I'm doing this, and then I'm like, when was there an I and when was there an E? Um, in this book, Norse religion, Norrøn religion by Gro Steinsland. I saw someone in the chat earlier saying that we should definitely have her on as a guest. She is retired, which I know, but it would be awesome to see if she would be up for coming on,
Mm-hmm.
because she has published some of the most like fundamental stuff into Norse literature in Norwegian that I can think
Mm-hmm.
of. But she writes in this book that a difficulty with the terms Aesir and Vanir is that the term Aesir often is used as to determine God or to speak of gods in general, but in other cases, Aesir is used as a term for a specific um, kind of family determination of the groups of the gods.
Mm-hmm.
Of so sometimes Aesir means all gods, and other times Aesir means this specific type of god. And that is just there. And you just kind of have to figure it out when it means one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's when we're talking about gods in Nordic mythology, let's take them to being a supernatural being versus let's because I think in Snorri's Edda when he talks about them coming from the Middle East and coming over, it's a way to humanize them and probably maybe discredit from a Christian standpoint and maybe put them as like you guys believed in these things then, but actually we now know that they're humans that were just cool and that's why you believed in them as gods, but really you should believe in the one true God. I think that's probably where that is coming from. So let's talk about them as actual just super beings, these
Yeah.
deities that exist kind of separate. They don't have to have like a
Yeah.
human
I also
tie.
just want to tack on real quick. I don't know what Snorri was thinking when he did that. I genuinely don't.
I would guess that's probably. I think that's the one that most people think that it's because it is written.
No, sure, but like, yeah, I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying that personally, on my end, that does track. But I also don't know what research has been done into that, and I don't know what he was thinking or whether it
Okay.
was a way to kind of legitimize the thought process or legitimize certain families kind of et or kind of clan
hmm
presence, whatever, what have you.
I think my
Yeah.
understanding from people we've had on here is that it seems as though it's possible, probably an idea to instead of saying your gods actually they're not real, just effectively figure it out. They're not real. Grow up, believe in our god. It's
Mm.
a way to ease that away from them and say, well, your gods
It's like, oh,
actually
it makes
do
sense that
exist.
you believed in them
Yeah, your gods
because
do exist, but actually, we now know that they're not gods. They were just like
Snorri's
really
like one of
good.
the OG like really annoying mansplainers.
Yeah, like we know that they're not, and they people say that like the idea of um Utgard Loki, that story Snorri may have made up to put in there to show that the gods actually fail. They're not. Thor's not super strong. He can be beaten by these things. He does these great feats, but actually he can be bested.
Mm.
So I think if we just put it into they are just gods. They separate it from that Snorri idea and Christianity. We have these figures who, Odin created the world and every son Thor, and you have all these different figures from two different families who traded hostages for whatever reason, and well, they had the big war, and then they traded hostages, and so we get this set of gods now. Um, the first thing that comes to my mind is how do you how do you differentiate between, let's say, okay, let's get straight into it. The
Hmm.
one that doesn't make sense to me would be Loki. You have his three children.
Yep.
Hel is commonly considered to be a goddess. The other two, Fenrir and Jormungandr, are considered not to be. You very rarely see them
But then at the
spoken about
same
to be gods.
but then at the same time, Hel is the only anthropomorphic one, isn't she?
Well, yeah. Then I wondered, do you think that then played a part
I don't
into?
know. I'm just kind of, trying to narrow down specifics as to why that might be the case. And, Jurmungandr is a big ass fucking snake. And Fenrir is a wolf.
hmm
So I don't know. Hale, like she has trouble walking because her legs don't move all that well. Can I also just give a huge ass shout out to Genevieve Gornichek who wrote The Witch's Heart because I read that a few months ago and I that book helped me refamiliarize myself with like some of the kind of the more niche parts of the whole Ragnarok stories
hmm
and yeah, so big props to Jen for that.
Yeah, but would you? Yes, Jennifer in the chat was saying there are people today who worship Fenrir as a god, and I've seen that as well. People who would worship Fenrir as a god, and
Can yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
no, that I think it's this idea of like kind of what is a god? Is it just, I guess, something, a being that people just worship? And can it
Yeah, because
change? Is it fluid? Is because again, I don't think
I
Loki
would say
would have.
so.
I don't think
Yes.
Loki would have been worshipped. But then again, I think Loki probably would have, if Loki did exist in the Viking Age, which again is another question in and of itself. I think he probably would have been considered a god, but I don't think people worshipped him. So therefore, kind of
But why don't you
a
think
god doesn't
people
have to be
worshipped him?
worshipped.
That also seems like a you problem, Dan. No, I'm just kidding. No,
Well,
I know why. I know why you think that. I was just having a laugh. Oh,
uh,
you're just taking a breathe in,
Whew.
breathe out.
But but again, this is me working out in my own mind in real time. Of the you have this figure who I think would be a god, but he wasn't worshipped. But I would have considered worshipping the figure a big part of defining them being a god. So that's kind of fucked me up in my own mind because
Yeah,
originally I would have said you had to be a god, people would have to worship you. But I don't think people in the Viking Age would have worshipped Loki. I don't think there's any evidence to support that.
you know what I'm gonna say when it comes to this? I have no idea what people in the Viking Age worshipped. Like I have
Yeah.
indications of what they might have thought. We have certain elements that give us ideas about what they might have done and who they might have prayed to, if that was even a thing. I don't even know if prayer actually was a thing. Um, but who they might have worshipped. And but then again, here's like academic mags coming into the scene. What is worship? What does that even mean? What is it? Like, I know what I mean when I say worship. I don't know what people in the Viking Age meant if worship was even a thing. But that's where I'm like, I think it's real. We should do a different episode on this, genuinely, with what I'm about to say,
Okay, go
because
on.
I was sat here thinking just now, where I was like, fuck me, I don't actually have an adequate
God's already seen that,
overview
Max.
of. Excuse me.
He said fuck me, and I was like, God's already seen that.
Oh no,
He's
yeah, yeah, they definitely have. They definitely
he's
have. Yeah,
he's
yeah,
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 yeah, that's on the list.
yeah. Don't try to trip me up. What I was saying was, go ahead. Um, was that I don't have an adequate overview of what gods from Norse mythology or Nordic mythology. Sorry, Matthias. Um, that we have archaeological evidence of. Here's because I know that there are some on the top of my head that I know of, but what are signs that we attribute to gods, and what are archaeological evidence that we can safely say can be attributed to this or this god? And
Well,
then the question becomes, what does the pantheon look like if we didn't have access to the written sources?
yeah,
How much
well,
have the written sources actually emboldened all of our understanding? Because they have 1,000%. But
and
then,
most of them being Snorri's written list that he made of
oh Jesus Christ,
gods, where
yeah.
he just
I love
lists.
Snorri and I love to hate Snorri.
Yeah,
I
well,
have
that's
such a
that's
complicated relationship with him.
it's true though, because you're so grateful that he wrote what he wrote, but also you're like, motherfucker, we can't believe any of this. So you're trapped in a catch-22 situation. But I think outside of the written sources, I think most of the evidence
I
for like the
think
gods
I
is
think I
based
know
on
what you're
place
gonna
names. I think we've done
Yeah, but that's also very tenuous. Would those place names have made sense if we didn't have the written sources?
yeah, well, yeah, but I think that's what a lot
It's
of the
almost like,
base on.
is it a self, like is it a self, like what's it called? Um is it like an Ouroboros that, like, because we have this and because we have this, this points to that, which again leads to this, like
Hmm.
Ouroboros meaning the snake that binds his own tail, and then you kind of keep it going. That
Yeah.
might not be the case because I'm not a linguist and I'm not an expert in place names. I don't know, but I'm just curious if we would even have anything to build off of if we didn't have the written sources. And I'm so happy that we do have the written sources, but they also did make, oh, if we clip this and put it online, I'm going to get yelled at, but I'm going to
We can
say
make
it
sure we don't.
anyway
Go on.
because it's good content. I will say hesitantly and somewhat anxiously, I would argue that to a certain extent, the written sources have made us a little bit lazy
Okay. Maybe.
because we think we've got it all figured out, but also not really.
Hmm.
But then do we really need to do more investigation outside of the written sources? Because we have them, so it's fine. And
But I think
again, hashtag
also,
not all academics, hashtag not all Nordic mythology.
but also, yeah, I think you have to use them because
Oh, of course.
how, yeah, else could we, unless a little figure says this is Odin, which they don't. How could you ever attribute that? And again, we've done episodes on little figures before and how you can't really everyone that looks like a woman, everyone's like, yeah, that's Freya, or one that looks like a guy. It's like that's
It's
that's
gotta be
Odin.
Odin or
Yeah,
Thor.
yeah. So you don't we even that you can't really attribute them to
No.
anyone. But okay, back
I
to
would be also very curious about, like, speaking of the archaeological evidence, I would be curious of, like, the amount of hammerheads that have been found, like the hammerhead pendant.
mhm.
To what extent they have runic inscriptions attributing them to Thornar, or whether that is an interpretive leap we have made because we know of Mjolnir and Thor. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think
I think there are
there must
runic
be.
inscriptions that attribute them to being to Thor. But like I at the top on the top of my head, like I should know this. I don't. I'm sorry. I'm a bad archaeologist and a bad academic, but I don't have all the answers. So here we are. But it would
I
be an interesting thing to look
Yeah,
into.
it's true because as much as it makes sense, but again, that's through what we've read and learned. It makes sense that every kind of hammerhead, every looking hammerhead pendant or like amulet or little figure, you would go, no, well, that's linked to Thor, but you don't really know that. That's you
Exactly.
don't we don't
Exactly.
really, and it is an interesting thing, and I think more people need to open their minds to just maybe we don't know everything. And that's why this is fun
No.
because it's just the two of us
Yeah.
trying to figure a really
Shit
complex
out.
topic out in real time, just kind of going,
Yeah.
actually, I don't fucking know. And then
No,
2 minutes
I
later,
don't.
being like, but what about this thing that I also don't know and
And
don't
you know
really
how we were
understand?
talking, like, for those of you who weren't here, before we started recording the episode, uh, Dan was a bit like, I'm low energy today, and I was a bit like, I'm all over the place. I'm also kind of low energy. We'll see where this goes. We've really got each other amped up now, Dan, because
Yeah.
I will say, as soon as you said, but after all the conversations we've had, it would make sense if, and my immediate thought was, but Dan, the past doesn't have to make sense to us.
Mm, yeah. Okay. So,
And he's like, I'm just gonna jump into
yeah,
the next thing.
I'm gonna get us back on track. Uh,
Thanks, Dan.
looking looking at what we've spoken about for the last hour and a half ish.
Yeah.
Um, what would you categorize a god in Nordic mythology? Putting yourself, no, from your perspective, from today's perspective, how would you categorize a god when it comes
Oh, I knew
to
you were gonna do this.
Nordic mythology? Like, what do you think it is? Because, like I said, there again, even as I ask, it does change because Fenrir being a prime example, I've seen people who would consider Fenrir a god. They have a shrine to Fenrir. They would worship Fenrir. Now, do I think people in the Viking Age did? No, I don't think they did. But religion is living, breathing. It changes, you know,
Yep.
throughout its history.
Yep.
So, is Fenrir a god? I don't know.
Um, I okay, but you're gonna have to help me out here, Dan, because you're gonna have to specify. Do you want me, Mags, the academic, to try to give a definition of like to what a god is in Nordic mythology, or do you want me to put myself in the shoes as someone who lived in the Viking Age and how they would have defined a god? Because if that is the case, I will say no.
no,
I
you,
cannot do that.
you, Mags, being a Norwegian lady who studied this. I don't mean as in like I don't want I don't expect you to give me the academic of what people
Oh, sure.
consider
No,
to
okay, okay,
be
okay, okay.
a, a god. I could
But I
because
also
I know
will
you. That's
say, us Scandies, Scandinavians, we do get a lot of credit for like innately being way more like familiar with Nordic mythology and all that stuff in the Viking Age. And to a certain extent, sure. But then you Brits are also a bit more educated in exactly what the chronological order of your royal family was and who reigned when, because that's part of your curriculum. So I'd say that like me being Norwegian doesn't actually qualify me to say anything, but I do appreciate the gesture.
there are some Norwegians that think it does give them
Oh,
authority.
oh, dude, I worked in the museum for years. I am well aware of this fact. I had a
I
dude literally try to touch the Oseberg ship while I was giving them a tour. And I said, you can't do that. And his reasoning for being allowed to do that was, why? I'm Norwegian. And I just went, I don't give a
fair,
shit. You're still not allowed to touch it, man.
fair. I've been in so many little Facebook arguments, as everyone knows, where somebody will reply to me back as a Norwegian or as as being Danish, and I'm like, look, that doesn't just give you automatic authority. Like
No.
I get the it is your history and your culture. It is mine. Like the Vikings had a fucking lot of influence in
Well, it's
English
our
history.
history, but I wouldn't necessarily like. I might get a lot of Norwegians on my back here. I genuinely would not say it was our culture because we made certain of the fact way back when in like the 1800s, Viking Age wasn't cool then until like the late 1800s. They were like, nah, the Vikings aren't rad anymore. Like, ugh, ugh. No, no, we want to be all about like the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. That's cool. Viking Age is like a like it's a now thing with our culture. It hasn't
It's cool.
persevered
It's a good
from the
tourism thing
Viking
now.
Age. Exactly. So like it's like it happened and then there was like a pause. It was a break for a long time and then we rediscovered it and now it's become a part of our culture again.
Hmm.
People I will say this. I've also had a little bit of wine, so I'm comfortable saying this now. I wouldn't be if I was completely sober. If you ever hear a Scandinavian saying that Viking Age stuff is inherently part of their culture, they are misinformed or they are intentionally being an ass face.
Yeah, I think I think that to be fair, there are so many people who've never been to Scandinavia who genuinely think that everybody in Scandinavia just fucking loves Vikings. They
Oh, and
think,
so many of us do the
oh,
opposite.
oh yeah, like they think that it's
They're
literally
like,
going to be
ugh.
tunics everywhere, Vikings everywhere. Everyone's going to love like Viking stuff, and it's just going to be almost. I don't know. I think some of them maybe think that it's just going to be like the Viking Age still, and then they must turn up and be so disappointed that there are just hot
I feel
dogs fucking everywhere in Scandinavia, and
McDonald's on every fucking corner.
yeah, it's just like anywhere else. And most people,
We
especially
even
like
had a few Starbucks here in Oslo at a certain extent, but
you
then the local franchises pushed them out. So we've only got one Starbucks now.
know, well, that's there's not a bad thing with that. But like most people, I would say like uh, don't give. I would say most young people don't give a fuck. From the ones that I've seen anyway, just walking around, you see people walking the street.
No.
I'd say they don't care. They're like, yeah, what Vikings? Yeah,
I
cool.
the young people I've met that genuinely do give a fuck are usually the ones who have a legitimate interest into it and are like low key maybe want to study like you know medieval literature or history or archaeology. People who have like a genuine interest in history or people who have ulterior motives. But
Hmm.
then they're usually not that kind of if they haven't figured out their disturbing ulterior motives yet, they're usually not that in your face about it because they're like, I should be low key for the time being.
Nice. Oh, now talk about
But
low
I
key.
but I will say I did a pretty good job of distracting you from giving my
You did.
definition.
You did. Now I'm what I'm gonna do, Mags, is I'm gonna go pee now. And I'm gonna
Hmm.
leave you for a minute to think about your answer. And then when I come back,
To think
we
about what I did.
we're both going to give an answer to what we think constitutes a god in
Okay.
the in Nordic mythology from our modern perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Get your little books out.
Okay. Okay. He can't hear me anymore. Chat, quickly, help me out. How do we want to define this? No, I'm just kidding. Well, but like, I don't know. Let's see what Carolyn Larrington has to say about this. I am. Can you hear the very pleasing sound of the page turning? I'm not even reading anything. I'm just enjoying turning the pages. Yeah. I open the book and literally the first thing I see, the first subtitle I see is Snorri Sturluson and the Clever Asian Migrants. Oh, no ASMR? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I tried. I'm not good at this. I can't hear the mic anymore because now my headset has to be plugged into, like, straight into my laptop. So I hope I'm not, like, shouting at you guys. I have enough faith in you that I think you'd have told me. Fuck, he's coming back. Goddamn, you didn't help me out at all, guys. Oh, I'll remember this.
What?
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 What's happening? What's happening?
Nothing?
All right. You had your time. What's your definition?
Fuck. Mm, I'm sorry, Sam. That's probably going to be very annoying to edit that sound. My definition is uh,
That your thinking noise.
yes. I get very ASMR when I think. I suck my teeth and like I make weird noises. My definition is that they were superhumans who could uh, impact the daily lives of humans and also had um, uh, supernatural slash superhuman abilities. Because in my mind, the Nordic gods were not omnipotent or omnipresent.
Mm-hmm.
That's one
No,
thing that separates them from other understandings of what a god is.
they're very
They're very here now.
they're very human. In a sense that they're not human, but they are because they have their fallacies. They have their good attributes. They can be silly. They can make mistakes. They can be laughed
Hmm.
at. Have jokes made about them, which is really interesting.
Yep.
It's I would say,
That's why I call them superhumans because they're
yeah,
like I said earlier, humans plus. They're like
mm,
a bit more than like they are very human, but also a bit more than human.
yeah, yeah. I think that's probably right. But I mean, the sky is made out of skull, so that's kind of not human.
Sure, but that yeah, fair.
And I think that a person in the Viking Age, a god, would be certainly like a humanoid figure. I think there's a reason why Hel is considered a goddess and the other two
You
sons
could also just say God.
god.
Why
I
she's
do
considered a
apologize.
god.
Well, you're right. You got me.
Mm.
You got me.
You brought it up.
I did, yeah. Yeah, I think that it would be they would be a humanoid figure.
Mm.
Um, they would be like superhuman, and I think that for the most part, and I think this about a lot of religions. They were a great explanation
Well,
for
fuck you too.
why the I do apologize. I was scratching my
No,
face with
that's
my middle
fine.
finger there. Uh, I think they were a great explanation as to why the world is the way that it was and why things happened in the world, and that's probably served a huge purpose
Mm,
for them as to like why the crops grew, why sometimes they didn't grow,
yep.
and why the sun came up every day, and all these things that science hadn't given an answer to, and that, and it's a tough one because part of me thinks, well, if I believe that, then maybe then I should just discredit religion because I think that it's just just a way to explain the unexplainable, and as science has come along and explained things.
But
But
here's the
I
thing.
don't think that is as clear
No,
cut as that.
but here's also the thing. Any scientist will tell you the more you deep dive into science, the less you understand. So
Right, well,
people have that like, but science can't, like, science explains this. Like, they have a very limited understanding of what science can and cannot explain.
mhm.
So, which is why I think it's interesting that there are a lot of people of faith in scientific uh, communities.
Yeah,
Because, and then when people who are maybe a little bit less informed are like, oh, but how can you like believe in this or have faith in this and still like do science? The people of faith are like, it's not an issue.
yeah, and I think it's probably at every point in time throughout history they've thought, well, we're the most advanced we're ever going to be. We know what is
Imagine how
right.
silly our science is going to seem at 250 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that shows with the advancement of like medical science that at all the points we think, oh, we know the answer, we've got the cure to this, and then something else comes along, and then or just look at the cures that we've put out that maybe have harmed
Just look
people
into the
later, and
but also just look into the field of meteorology. Just being able to foretell the fucking weather is
yeah, that's a good one.
insane. And being
Yeah,
able to
they never
predict
get it fucking
how
fully right though.
weather. No, they don't. Because it's as if nature is a little bit fickle,
Yeah,
maybe? And but also just being able to
is
predict
nature a god?
Gaia, Mother Earth. I mean, I didn't say it. I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe.
Who
Nature
knows?
is a fickle mistress. But I was just like, but then again, who knows what that branch of science is going to look like in 250 years?
Yeah, you know, it'd be really interesting because yeah, if you looked at what they were thought 250 years ago and what we know now, and the speed, and it's exponentially getting quicker, isn't it? It's just on a curve. If
Sure.
you look at what we know just in our lifetimes versus, I watched a program the other day on TV. Well, it was like a clip from back. It was about the 7/7 bombings, but it had some footage from the time, and I was like, "Motherfucker, did TV look that bad
Yep.
in 2005? Was it
Yep.
that bad
Yep.
that I'm
No
looking back
4K
at it?
for you.
Yeah, I'm looking back at it like, how did I ever watch this? Like,
I
this
just think
is
back to the days
awful."
in like 2011 to 2013 where I would, please don't put me in jail, where I would torrent Doctor Who legally
that's
and
that's
watch it
that's
in like
that's the nerdiest,
four.
sweetest thing to
Yeah.
torrent.
I was obsessed. But like I would torrent from like the ninth Doctor onwards and I would watch it in like 480p. If
Mhm.
anything comes up now in 480p, even if I'm not going to watch it, so 480 pixels per whatever it is, um, like sub HD, sub for like it's so sub. Like even if I'm not going to watch something, if it shows up in 480p now, I'm like, what the fuck is this crap?
Yeah, it's
I'm not watching this.
but but at the time we watched it, I'm like, this is
Yeah.
crystal clear.
And at the
This
time,
is
I was
the
like,
best thing I've ever
even
seen.
if even if I wasn't like super happy with it, even if it was if I was like, this is a little bit pixelated, I was like, you know what? This is the best I'm gonna get. I'm fine with it.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, not. I don't
No,
have time for this shit.
no, no. I so when I got Netflix for myself for the first time, which was about 3 years ago, just like my own
Oh
Netflix.
wow, late bloomer.
Well, no, I'd had Netflix as like a joint account prior,
Oh,
but then
yep.
I set up on my own,
I still do.
and I a lot of people do.
Hmm.
I didn't realize that they still do a standard, like just SD version, and I was like, I text my friends, and I was like, "Is Netflix being funny for you guys? Like, why is my
No,
Netflix
you gotta pay more.
all blurry?" And they're like, "Well,
Mm.
have you got the HD version?" I'm like, "I don't know. I've been watching it for 6 months blurry, thinking that my internet was slow." I thought my internet was just really bad, and eventually I mentioned it to one of my friends. They're like, "No, you need to get HD," and I was like, "What?"
You idiot.
Well, no, I think that they're purposefully making that bad quality because nobody films in SD anymore. They are
No,
lit.
why would they?
They are purposely stepping that down to
Yeah, yeah.
charge people more.
Late stage capitalism.
Yeah.
But we've gone
All
so
right.
extremely off topic.
We have okay. Um, what about the
Also, I
yacht?
gotta pee. So
Okay, you
should
got.
we wrap up the episode or
No, we're not done. I'm having fun.
okay, because I'm like, we could also do like a Q&A and then just keep talking and then Sam won't have to edit the shit out of this.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. All right, yeah, because I want to ask like about the other figures outside of
Sure.
the main, so like the Jotun, the the dwarves, the elves, these kind of figures, and your thoughts on
I can
them.
do a little show and
So
tell when it comes to like Jotuns and stuff too.
yeah, so
It's
let's
not going to be
wrap
what you
up.
expect.
No, just we're just gonna look at them and see if we think they're
Mm.
gods.
Yeah.
So if you wanna hear more of this chaotic episode of us literally figuring out our own thoughts live on air, then they do go over to Patreon.com/, Nordic Mythology Podcast. £3 a month. You get all the bonus episodes. At this point, there must be over 100 bonus Q&A episodes. Sometimes, like I said, I imagine this one's going to be quite a long one. We'll do, the guests will sometimes stay for an extra hour and we'll just talk. And there's so much more information in those. So please go and check those out. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this.
This has been
Like I said,
a lot of fun. And I also just want to reiterate we've mentioned this before, but for those of you who are potentially new listeners, just so you also know that the what you contribute with to Patreon is also something that helps our team behind the scenes of the podcast. All the wonderful people who do all the lovely branding and illustrations and editing and social media outreach. Dan and I do this for free. So
mhm.
you are not paying for us to sit and drink and talk crap.
Oh, that would
You
be
are
good though.
paying the
That would be
page.
good.
That would be the life, but it is
Uh,
not the life we are currently
No,
living. And I'm
no.
okay with that because our wonderful creative team deserves every cent that they get.
Yeah, no, we have, if we pull the curtain back, we have a lot of fun. I've been doing this, oh fuck me, it's like 5 years now or something. And I love it. I love every second of it.
I'm doing okay.
I
No, I'm just kidding.
guarantee no, I guarantee every week before we start the show, I'm like, oh, I can't be bothered. Another like, 'cause it's my Sunday evening every Sunday, and I'm like,
I know.
I'm like, I can't be bothered. But as soon as we start, I just get so interested, and I'm just here, and I'm like excited, and I love learning. I love this topic, and I love just going over everything. But like you say, we don't take anything from this because we don't make enough to take
Nope.
anything from this. We make enough from the Patreon just to cover what we want to do. And there are so many things that I would love to do. I'd love to give Sam, our editor, freedom to go into old episodes and make maybe like 20-minute short clip videos for YouTube where people can get a bite size kind of topic. But we just don't have that capacity right now. And I would love to do that. So if people can support and they want to see that extra content, if you can go over to Patreon and help us out, we do really appreciate it. It's not just a case of that we say that and we don't mean it. We do because it literally helps us keep going. So yeah, if you can, please do. And Max, where can people find you?
You guys can find me on Instagram at archaeomags, archaeo with a K.
There you go. For me, it's Daniel underscore Farrand one and Hans Vodin for the business. If you are just watching on YouTube now, if you want to see more of this, like I say, it is on the Patreon. You can hit the little link in there, which will bring you straight through to the direct kind of in-house link that brings you straight to watch live rather than through YouTube. And you can watch the bonus stuff. So when it's whether it's the Q&A or the small episodes that we do again, which I cannot praise highly enough. I think those
They're
have
so
been,
fun.
yeah, they've been
They've
the most,
honestly gone above my expectations.
yeah, the most I've laughed in I
A
don't know how
while.
long. Like, yeah, the last two in particular. The first one, I think we were finding our feet,
Sure,
but
sure.
episode 2 and 3, I at some point in those episodes cried laughing. I have not laughed like that in such
They're
a
also
long
the
time.
first episodes that I've listened back to in a while.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so fun.
yeah. They're just so much fun, and I think we're going to end up doing a lot more. So if you want to listen to those, they are lighthearted, they are fun, they're a little bit silly. There's some knowledge in there, but they're just three people being a little bit silly, reading
Smut.
Viking erotic literature, I guess.
Not even
And you know
Viking
what?
erotic literature, like just like loosely inspired by something kind of Viking adjacent, like
Yeah,
something.
the last one was lacking in the smut, I would say. But
It was.
yeah, so if you do want to listen to those, do head over to our Patreon. They, like I said, they are a lot of fun. We love doing them, and we will release an occasional one for free. So we release episode 2. Go and listen to that if you haven't. And every so often we will release one, but for the most part they are going to be on Patreon. And yeah, they are one of the favorite things we've done for a long time. And on that note, let's wrap this up, and then we will carry on effectively the Q&A side of this podcast. So if you can, like and share wherever you get your podcast, 5-star rating. If you can, it does help us. I know it seems very menial, but what takes you 30 seconds to hit the little 5-star, leave a little review, does help. It sounds trivial, but somebody else might read that, or it bumps us up on the little algorithm and thinks that people are really enjoying the show. So it maybe shows it to somebody. You have to play the game with this kind of stuff now. And yeah, with that said, thank you very much.